I've been in software for more than a decade, and I've been running a tech and AI studio for the past 3 years. And in 2025, this is the tech stack I recommend you use if you're building a SaaS product. And before we start, these are the things that we'll be optimizing for, because depending on what you're building, you need to pick a different stack. But what we are optimizing for is you want to keep a very lean team. You don't want to hire a big team. You don't want multiple roles. You want to keep it as lean and as simple as possible. Second, you're going to be building a front-end heavy MVP, meaning the value that your users will derive from the product is the usability in the front end. And of course, it's going to have some back-end infrastructure and some back-end logic, but you don't want to be running something that requires a very heavy back-end, cron jobs, etc. So it's very front-end heavy, very visual. The third thing that we're going to be optimizing for is you might want to take advantage of AI, but you don't want to make it the core thing of your product. You're very happy to consume APIs from the major AI providers. You don't want to be building your own data pipelines or your own custom models. And so with these requirements out of the way, first thing that we need to talk about is languages. Do you want to be using TypeScript across your entire stack? There's no question about it. TypeScript is the language of the web. You need it for the front end, and you might as well use it for the back end. Again, because you don't want to be hiring different people and having different stacks in the front end and the back end. Now, a caveat that I will give, if anybody tells you that you should be using JavaScript instead of TypeScript because it's simpler, run away immediately. That person has never built anything in production. TypeScript is the industry standard, is safer, and there's no reason not to use it in 2025. Now, another caveat that I want to make is Python. You might have heard that Python is the language to build AI on, and that's true. But again, if you want to keep the team light and you want to make sure that you're building the prototype as fast as you can, you don't want to split your competencies or your team into a Python-based team or part of the team and a TypeScript based. You can do everything that you could do with Python in TypeScript unless you go super heavy on AI, which, as I said at the beginning, that's not really what we're aiming for here. So, summary statement, use TypeScript, don't think about it twice. Second, we want to be talking about frameworks. And the framework that you want to be using for the front end is you want to be using React, and you want to be using Next.js, which is a framework built on top of React. It's never been about what's the best framework. Best doesn't matter. React is the most widely used framework, and it's very well supported, and Next.js took that to the next level, and the core React team now recommends Next.js as the way to implement React. Vercel, which is the company that created Next.js and it's currently supporting it, is building a lot of tooling and infrastructure around AI. They're building their own models. And so even if you find a different framework that would be better or more pleasant to use, for example, Vue, Svelte, etc., the benefits don't really matter anymore because all the AI has been trained on React patterns, which means AI is the best at building React. Now, not the best React, to be honest, but React nonetheless. And so you want to be choosing a framework that has the most support and that is going to be the easiest to find developers for and to make sure that AI knows how to build. And again, Vercel is building a lot of tooling around React and Next.js simply because they are incentivized to use it. So certainly pick Next.js. That's going to be the absolute safest bet. Now, if you feel like you need a bit more of a reliable, like well-built backend than what Next.js offers, and that's a big if. Most of the times you don't, but if you do, you should go for Nest.js. Most people might recommend Express because it's the most popular one, and so Nest.js is built on top of Express, but it abstracts a lot of the typical patterns that you would find in a well-architected backend application. If you could go with Express, you could just use the built-in Next.js backend. If you feel like that's a limitation, pick Nest.js, and the learning curve is a little bit higher. Now, AI still works very, very well with it, and it will force you to make sure that your architecture and your patterns are spot on. So, summary statement, Next.js, and if you feel like you need a better backend than what Next offers, use Nest. Now, next up, we want to be talking about database and object storage. Almost every SaaS that you build will need some sort of database to persist data and some sort of maybe object storage if the users are uploading files, etc. Now, for object storage, the typical industry standard is using Amazon S3. My recommendation is that you go for Supabase for both database and object storage. And the reason for that is that if you've never used AWS, setting up the user authentication and the roles and configuring S3 is a lot of hassle, and you can just get a simple Supabase subscription and it will come with both. And the database is built on top of Postgres, which is a super safe bet. And then the storage is a wrapper around S3. And when you're building your MVP, when you're building your SaaS, the cost is going to be insignificant in terms of paying for database or storage, as opposed to just going directly to Amazon. And it's going to simplify your tooling, it's going to simplify your user management, your billing, etc. So certainly go with Supabase, super solid choice. And a tip that I will give you is, if you can, with Supabase, don't use the native Supabase SDK to access the database, implement Drizzle instead. And the reason you want to do it is, in my opinion, Drizzle is a lot better, it's nicer to use, and it works with Postgres. So it has a lot of documentation around how to use it with Postgres, how to use it with Supabase directly, but both your developers and your AI coding, if you're using AI, will know how to use Drizzle and will like using Drizzle a lot more than touching Supabase directly. That's about database and object storage. Now, the next and probably final thing that you need is some sort of authentication. Now, you could go with Supabase, and Supabase has some authentication capabilities. However, I recommend you use Clerk instead. And the reason for that is Clerk offers a super generous free tier. So if you're building an MVP and you don't know how many users you have, Clerk is going to be basically free until your product has any traction. And it gives you a lot of things out of the box, like very nice components, all your email flows, all your reset password, etc. They're super simple to implement. They're very nice, very developer friendly. And you just need to integrate that with Supabase, which again, Claire has very nice documentation, so you'll have no problem. In my opinion, trying to implement authentication with Supabase, you'll need to do all these things yourself. Now, if you don't tell your AI or your developers what you want, AI tends to prefer using Supabase for absolutely everything. I feel like Replit and probably Cursor, that's what they prefer. But you should explicitly say, use Clerk and pass it the dogs, because it's going to build a way more rounded authentication system, and you'll feel the difference in the final product. And again, the cost is going to be negligible until you get any traction. By any traction, I mean 10,000 users, which for most SaaS would mean massive success. And at that point, you can rethink all these choices if you have to. That's authentication. Next thing is you want to be thinking about some sort of component library. You probably don't want to design everything from scratch unless a key value of your product is how well designed and how unique it is. And in 99.9% of the cases, that's not the case. So pick a component library. My suggestion in 2025 with AI is using ShadCN. In my opinion, it's not the best component library. I don't really like their idea of taking the library and putting it in your code. That's a topic for a different video. However, AI loves ShadCN, and all the big companies, Vercel primarily, but Supabase as well, etc., they're all implemented ShadCN, and the ecosystem is growing quite aggressively, and it feels very modern. That's the truth. It actually looks quite good, and it's very customizable. So, as I said before, for the frameworks, you don't want to pick necessarily the best tool, but the one that's most supported, and ShadCN seems to be the case nowadays. Now, if you don't want to use ShadCN, The second choice I would make is probably Ant Design. Now, in my opinion, it looks a little bit dated in 2025, and it's not as easy to work with AI, but still works fairly well. And the reality is ShadCN is a very complex library, and it will cover all your use cases. If you're working with a design team that can build a design system, Undesign has a way more complex design system that can cover all your use cases. So maybe if you have a proper designer taking care of the designs of your MVP, use Undesign. If not, ShadCN, safest bet. And finally, the two last things is if you have payments, which you might not for your MVP, but if you have payments, go with Stripe. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Implement Stripe. Stripe documentation is fantastic. Now they have AI. You can ask AI in the Stripe docs and it will tell you how to implement it perfectly. There's a little bit of a learning curve. There's no other way around it. Stripe is the way. And finally, you probably also want analytics in your product. So you can use pretty much anything for that. You can use Google Analytics if you know how to use it. My recommendation for analytics for a SaaS product is using Pothawk. I love that company. They have very nice documentation. On a personal level, I have no affiliation with them, but I really like how they run their business. It's a very sustainable business, and the product is honestly really, really good. I haven't run into anybody that doesn't love using Pothawk, and it's growing and getting better every day. So that would be my top recommendation. And that would be it. Honestly, something that you could do is if you can take the transcript of this video and just put it into ChatGPT and say, hey, give me a checklist of the tech stack for my SaaS. And then you go into Cursor, you go into Replit, it's going to basically tell you how to do it. So that's the way I will take this video. I will watch the video and then go do it. And that's it. Use this tech stack. Let me know if you agree or if you disagree down in the comments. And I will catch you in the next one.